From a defabricated garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, how to enjoy your first ski trip this winter without plowing into innocent seniors. And now, the podcast host who has no worries for such things because he skis like a zebra on the Serengeti, Pete Dominic!
Not wrong again, Pete Co. Thank you very much. Not the first time I've been told that I ski like a zebra on the Serengeti, and do watch out for folks on the slopes if you can get out to the slopes, if there is snow where you live, and if you can afford such a thing. Thank you, Pete, and thank you for pressing play, tuning in, downloading, subscribing, whatever you say, to this here podcast. I am Pete Dominic. I hope you are doing okay. Hope you had a good weekend. If you're listening on Monday, time to kick off the last week of January 2023. And for me, very special because Ava turned 18 years old over the weekend, and it was a wonderful weekend-long celebration. But now it's time to get ready for another week, head into the fray, get after it, stay present, do what you do, and other hacky phrases to motivate you here at the opening. Welcome to several new subscribers over the past week. I'll give shout-outs later on this week, but really excited, motivated, and inspired to see folks signing up for the podcast and being very generous with their subscriptions. Thank you very much. If you haven't signed up, standupwithpete.com. I'm here doing this here show each and every weekday for you. Should be up by midnight most days, latest 6 a.m. hopefully. So it'll be there when you wake up, no matter what time zone you're in. Two great guests joining me on today's podcast. Always great to have Maura Quint, who joins us almost every Monday. Maura Mondays, we call it. Great, fun, interesting, and helpful discussion with Maura today. And I'm really excited to welcome back to the show for the first time in a while, from Heated.Word, the best climate journalist in all of climate journalism, the great Emily Atkin is back on the show. Very, very excited to share my conversation with her. And that starts at about 56 minutes after my conversation with Maura. Also, third week, starting with my intern, Odessa Son of University of Wisconsin, Whitewater. She is doing really awesome, and it's so great to have somebody to work with, especially someone as talented, hardworking, and ambitious and smart as young Odessa. Already got me in touch with another young person to talk to for the Gen Z segment, which I'm really excited about. But let's quickly just mention a few news stories from the weekend. Yesterday, we all woke up to, if you looked at the news on Sunday morning, a horrific shooting in a predominantly Asian American community in Monterey Park, California. 10 are dead in the shooting. The gunman apparently was found shot himself in his van later on Sunday. California police have identified the gunman suspected of killing those 10 people at a ballroom dance studio. He's a 72-year-old Asian American himself, apparently. Died of a self-inflicted gun. A 72-year-old guy. He had a pistol and had one of these extended clips, like they're calling it an assault pistol. Just absolutely horrific news coming out of Southern California on Sunday morning. Another mass shooting that apparently ended with the shooter killing himself. And I don't know what else to say about that at this point. I just hope that we can not become immune to it. But sadly, just not a shocking thing to hear, though, in that community. And a 72-year-old man, a really, really disturbing situation out there in California, to say the least. If you're affected by it or know anybody out there that needs to or wants to talk about it at some point publicly, let me know if it can do any help. I've recently been in contact with one of the parents from Uvalde, where those poor children were murdered in cold blood, and I'm probably going to be taping a discussion with Brett Cross is his name. He lost his son Uzziah in May of last year, and I just don't want to forget these things. It's easy to look away because it's so painful to look at them, but I'm going to take them head on whenever possible here on the show. I also spoke with former police sergeant Ganel Aquilino off the record, but on the phone over the weekend, and I'll probably be talking to him later on this week. He, of course, one of the Capitol police officers who was injured severely on the January 6th 2021 attack on the Capitol, and I've become pretty friendly with Ganel and looking forward to taping this conversation with him. He's actually got a book, an upcoming book, American Shield, The Immigrant Sergeant Who Defended Democracy. Really interesting dude. Love talking with him. So expect that coming up. Over the weekend, also watched that documentary on HBO. 4 hours at the Capitol. Really fascinating, important, and, of course, enraging to see, but never forget, and looking forward to talking to former police sergeant Ganel Aquilino about his new book and his life. Look forward to that coming up soon. All right, back to top stories real quick. The drip, drip, drip of the Biden files, the classified files that have been found more turning up. The Justice Department, in a invitation by President Biden and his lawyers, said, yeah, come on over. Why don't you come over and see if you can find any more documents? Well, guess what? They turned up more documents at his Wilmington, Delaware home over the weekend. So that is proving to be a real distraction for the Biden administration and for the public. I think it's fair to say the President Biden, we found out over the weekend, at least it wasn't announced, I don't think, but he is going to be having a new chief of staff after 2 amazing years with Ron Klain. He has decided and settled on Jeff Zients, who is a former pandemic response leader for the administration, led the largest vaccination campaign in U.S. history. So I'm sure right-wingers will have a field day with Jeff Zients. Ron Klain expected to step down in the weeks after the State of the Union, which, by the way, will be on February 7th. The first major departure from Biden's inner circle. None of his cabinet secretaries have left. At this point in the Trump administration, I think he had 17 secretaries of state just 2 years in. So, yeah, I think it was January of his second year when he tried to appoint Oscar the Grouch from Sesame Street and was told, we can't do that, sir, because it's a Muppet. It's a puppet, not a real person. And he said, oh, it's too bad. I really like that Oscar. They're grouchy. Speaking of which, I won't say much about Trump. I don't say too much about Trump, but I don't have to. But, of course, to make fun of him. Over the weekend, he was at the funeral for Diamond in Silk, and apparently he complained about how long it was during his speech. He was like, well, it's like 3 hours long. And then he complained about not winning the election at her speech. And then he said he didn't know Silk that well, but he was really impressed with the comments that she made. It was just so bizarre. It's all so bizarre. Tucker Carlson is telling people on Fox News, he's telling his viewers that nicotine is good and THC is bad. Cigarettes are good and marijuana is bad. Or, I mean, this whole thing about menthol. Anyway, listen to this. One of the most unhinged rants I've ever heard on all of Fox News. That says a lot.
They hate tobacco, and it's not because it causes cancer. They don't care about your health. They closed the gyms during COVID. Anyone who closed a gym during a pandemic that killed people who were fat clearly doesn't care about your health at all. They hate nicotine. They love THC. They're promoting weed to your children, but they're not letting you use tobacco or even non-tobacco nicotine delivery devices, which don't cause cancer. Why do they hate nicotine? Because nicotine frees your mind, and THC makes you compliant and passive. That's why they hate it. It's a real threat to them.
Wow. They hate it. It's a real threat to them. Government doesn't care about your health. Same narrative playing out over on Hannity with our old friend Will Cain, who had this to say.
Any lesson that I took away from the pandemic is there's a great amount of people who simply want to be told what to do.
Yeah. Yep.
Tell me what shot to take. Yeah. Tell me when I can come out of my house. Tell me what mask I have to wear. And tell me how to raise my kids. There are some people that believe, sadly, that's an easier life.
I will never listen to the government on any health issue ever again. Everyone agree?
Yes.
Yes. Ever. They got it all wrong.
All right. They got it all wrong. So much damage. That narrative, and it's been going on for 30 years in this country. There's no nuance, there's no detail, there's nothing, and it just sucks. I hate it. It's the thing that's probably animated me and frustrated me, and specifically, I've worked hard to fight against my entire career on stage, on TV, radio, podcasts, on social media, wherever I go. I've always been fighting that narrative because it's so simple and so stupid and so hacky. And my longest, oldest, closest friend is a government scientist. He works for the state of New York, studying mosquitoes and the diseases that they carry and spread and tracking them and making sure we know where the West Nile virus and other viruses that mosquitoes are carriers of are in New York State. Shares that data with the public, with the government, so that we cannot die because of a mosquito bite. And that's just the very beginning. That's just one example from my own personal life of someone I know and love and respect. This idea that I'll never listen to the government again, or we just want to be told what to do. It's just so stupid. Human beings have to rely on human beings to know what to do all day, every day, in so many ways. Hi, can you tell me which way to the park? Yeah, it's right up here on the left. Okay, thank you. And then you get up there and the park isn't on your left. I will never rely on another person in this neighborhood to tell me where a thing is. I will do it myself. Well, then you're going to do what? You're going to look at a map? Well, someone made that map. You're always relying on someone. It's a ridiculous, stupid argument made to appeal to the lizard brain of someone who is looking to be angry and for something to file their grievance against. It's just so predictable and unimpressive, this entire argument and narrative that has been going on in this country for so long. And let me add one more thing to my own little rant, which apparently I'm doing here, which is this from David Roberts at Volts, which is a great newsletter on renewable energy. He writes, I've said this before, but the most pathetic thing about current right-wing culture wars is that they are defending a lifestyle. Giant SUVs and highways and strip malls and fast food and suburbs, poisonous, deadly consumer products. That's a 100% creation of late 20th century corporations. I just thought that was an interesting point. The most pathetic thing about right-wing culture wars is that they're defending a lifestyle that is 100% a creation of late 20th century corporations. And for those of you that might be thinking, well, Pete, they were saying that they won't trust government to tell them what to do. I get it. Anybody can criticize government at any level, anytime. But understand how it works. Try to make it better. It would be great if we could have a government for the 21st century, a government that understands how technology works in 2023. I'm all for making government as efficient and uncorrupted and trustworthy for everybody in the public and to do what's in the public's interest. But it will never be perfect. I will tell you, that's the secret, folks. The government of your town, your state, it will always have problems with corruption and inefficiencies and bureaucracy and certain people not doing a good job. It will always be flawed. And if there's a better alternative, by all means, send me an email, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and I would be happy to take a look at your idea for what we can replace a government for the people and by the people with. Perhaps a robot, a George Santos robot. All right, I thought I was done, but I do have this. George Santos news, the George Santos update, the gift that keeps on giving. Here he is back in August in a virtual candidate forum. George Santos suggesting his Jewish ancestry could land him a slot on the prestigious House Foreign Affairs Committee.
But I would also be very strong on foreign affairs, as I'm a son of two immigrants. I am the grandchild of Holocaust survivors and the son of a 9/11 survivor. I strongly believe that foreign affairs is something that I would have plenty of passion and input that I'd love to leave in my market.
All right, so the son of a 9/11 survivor, and well, now on his website, George Santos, now that he is a congressman, that was from a forum, a candidate forum. On his website, he claims that his mother was at her office inside the World Trade Center during the 9/11 attacks. But records obtained by NBC News now show she was living in Brazil at the time. So, there's some confusion there, and maybe we can clear that up. A reporter, I'm not sure who this is. I think it might be the NBC News reporter, but this is a really, really important what she did, I think, and exactly what should be done, following him through the airport asking him this one question.
Was your mother at the World Trade Center on 9/11?
Look, this isn't how you conduct an interview.
It's not an interview. No one's trying to interview you. We're trying to confirm the details of the confusion now here. You say that you were the son of a 9/11 survivor, that your mother was at her office inside the World Trade Center. New reports say that your mother was not in America on 9/11. We're not interviewing you. We want to get the story. You're not answering our questions, our emails, our texts. So we want to write this story correctly and responsibly. What is the answer to this simple question?
You're at the World Trade Center on 9/11. Was your mother in the World Trade Center on 9/11? Where was your mother on 9/11? Where was your mother on 9/11? Where was your mother on 9/11?
This is now in the garage at the airport. I mean, they keep following him and asking him that question, and that was exactly what needs to be done. He's a U.S. congressman, and he is not answering that question. His time has got to be limited. They've got to force this guy out, right? Anyway, I thought that was an important story because it shows why the reporting is important and how it's done. If you don't answer our questions when we call for our story, we're writing a story about you. We would love to hear your truth on this story. If you don't answer our questions or your reps don't answer our questions when we call their email by a certain time, we're filing our story. They file the story. All right, well, there's new information out. They got to get the answers. He will not answer them. His reps won't answer them, so they run up to him, and they have to do it this way. Might seem ugly to George Santos, but that's just good journalism, in my opinion. Also, he was asked about the whole situation of whether or not he was ever a drag queen or dressed in drag, and that he did have an answer for.
I was not a drag queen in Brazil, guys. I was young and I had fun at a festival.
All right. I don't know if you could hear that. I was not a drag queen in Brazil. I was young and I had fun at a festival. So, of course, the reason that's important is because the Republican Party accepts George Santos for doing drag. Then maybe they would stop targeting, mocking, and threatening others who dress in drag, aka drag queens. Wajad Ali asking that question on Twitter. Why would you accept Santos but simultaneously promote groomer conspiracies, asking for a nation? All right. That's more than enough news. I got to get this baby up. Sorry, I'm talking for almost 18 minutes. Okay, coming up, my conversation with Emily Atkin. You're not going to want to miss that. Really, really good. I hope that you will listen to that, if not today, at some point during the week. But right now, let's kick off this week and Monday with Maura Mondays, one of my favorite people to talk to, which is why I try to get her to join me every Monday here on Stand Up. She is a very respected writer and activist and person, at least in the circles of people who I respect. Her day job is at the Americans for Tax Fairness, where she runs their campaigns, but most people know her from her social media on Twitter at Behind Your Back, now on TikTok, which we talked a lot about. I talked about the comparisons between the two, and you can find her writing everywhere from The Onion to New Yorker to McSweeney's. She's brilliant, she's smart, she's honest, she's vulnerable. She's a really good friend of mine. She is simply one of the best. Let's do it right now with Maura Quint.
All right. We missed her last week. I've got her back this week. Here she is. Maura Quint, everybody. Great to see you. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Pete. It's good to be back.
I like to see you on TikTok now. You're not doing. I want more TikToks. I like when you just start your TikTok with so I just, because it's like you're doing stand up basically and I get excited because you're going to tell me something you just saw in the street and it's going to be funny every time.
It's funny. I did like a whole bit the other day. Hopefully you didn't see it because I deleted it, but I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, this is what I would do on stage. Like, this is a bit. Like I would do this bit. It needs to be tightened. I need to like wordsmith it, but this is the general gist of it. And I was really excited about that for a minute. And then I was like, okay, but this sucks. And I deleted it. But yeah, that's it. It feels, I was talking to a friend. I'm like, it feels like tiptoeing into stand up. Right?
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And I love it. I like when whatever. I like all of them that you put up. You haven't put up that many, but I like them all. But I like when you're like in your car. I like when you're out in the world observing life. And then you're saying the thing you can't say out loud to the camera, to us on TikTok.
And I think that's really fun for someone like you to do when you're out in the wild observing humanity at its normal.
All right, I'll try and do more of it, because I mean, everything I've done on TikTok has been completely spontaneous. Like, I've never once planned out. I've never thought. It's the same thing with Twitter. Like, I don't think these things through. These are all just my brain vomiting something, and that's what's happened. Where I'm like, oh, I'm wearing mascara. I could do a TikTok. Here we go.
Well, you're a lady with a lady face and lady body, and you go and put all that on TikTok. That's not like Twitter. It's kind of like, tell me the difference between the responses you get. You've been a Twitter pro and expert and really big on Twitter for a long time. And if people want to look you up, they can find you and see that you look this way and you have lady parts. But it's more like kind of, cool. I would imagine. I'm sure there's a lot of ugliness in comments, but like, it's your words. You're resting on your words there, your thoughts, your jokes, your ideas, and you get respect based on that. And I think that's a great way. But now on TikTok, it's similar. It's your content is your thoughts on things, but you're putting your face and your body parts out there. What's the difference, and how is it feeling? Are you getting a lot of comments?
TikTok was terrifying to me, and I'm still not fully into it. It's just because I'm kind of trying to stay away from Twitter. It's just like another world to sort of play in. But I mean, being a corporeal being in public is so frightening to me. I hate it. I hate sort of being seen. I feel like I'm constantly braced to just hear terrible things about how I look. And I've gotten better as I've gotten older in terms of like being able to deal with that. But for Twitter, when I first joined Twitter, I was completely anonymous. I didn't have my face on it. I didn't have my name on it. And when I first posted my picture on Twitter, I was so scared, and I felt really, really nervous about that. But, like, it's a photo. I can choose the photo I like the most. I can make sure that like I feel good about that. And so then when I would get inevitably some forms of hate, like, I knew it was a decent picture. I knew that was like a totally fine looking person in that photo. So if I would get like hateful comments about my appearance, I knew that they weren't real, like, because it was such a, it's like such a staged look, right? Like, I know exactly that's a totally nice enough looking person. And TikTok is scarier because it's a little, I'm animated. I don't have as much control. I'm moving. You're seeing a little bit more, and I'm you feel more physically vulnerable to hearing hateful things. And I'm sure they're going to come soon, now that today is the first day that I ever like put anything up there that indicated my politics in any way. Up until now, I've just been kind of randomly chatting about nothing. And it has amassed a certain...
Yeah, tell us what, I just watched those. I think this is one where you saw a bumper stickers, and you commented on Trump bumper stickers or something, which outed your politics. And then was it the next TikTok, or just the reaction from, you say it in a TikTok, but it was
crazy. I immediately, I posted that I posted this thing about hating Trumpers, and I just immediately started getting like these hateful responses, or, not hateful, but just like dudes being mad at me because I had amassed a certain following, not a large one, but a tiny following on TikTok of like one particular type of dude. And, I guess some of them are Republicans. So they were really, really mad that this chick that they'd previously I don't know, commented on her physical attractiveness, hated them. Like, that was an thing that pissed them off. So they had to
those comments, do the comments add up? How do you log the comments? How do you keep score of compliments, no matter how they may come? If they're crude, you're hot, I want a blank, whatever. I don't know what they say, versus any of the comments that might somehow be negative, that are certainly going to come at you no matter what you look like, if you give an opinion that someone doesn't like, unfortunately. But like, do you kind of, it all keep score? Because aren't there a lot of guys saying things about how attractive you are, and then
so when they're negative about my appearance thus far, it's one of them. It's like really funny to me when like sometimes when they're mad at me, like, but they want to hit my appearance, they'll tell me like, oh, I look like a slut or something, which always makes me laugh, because I'm just like, oh, you think I'm attractive? Like, that's what you're telling me. Oh, you want to have sex with me and you can't. Like, that's what that reads as. So that's fine. that doesn't upset me at all. I think the one that they try the most is they come at me for like not being 25. Like, I get that one a lot. Like, whatever. Mean? Like, you wish you were 25 or something, or like you're like such just shit like that. It's always 25. That's always the like number. And I'm just always like, that was a terrible time in my life. Thank God I'm not. Like, are you kidding me? You're reminding me how glad I am to not have to go through my 20s again. That sucked. I don't want to be there anymore. Like, thank you. You're right. I'm much wiser than you are, you idiot. Like, it's just that the age thing doesn't get to me. I mean, it might if they started. I don't want to out this, but like if they started calling me much, much older than I currently am, that might actually start to get to me, but they never do.
Look at this 60-year-old bag over here.
Yeah, exactly. Like the biggest insult they can ever do is like nailing my age exactly. That's the thing where I'm like, that's the highest they've ever gone, like getting my age on the money. And it's just like, okay, I accept that I look my age. Like, all right, I can deal with that. But otherwise, this sort of like taunting as though I wish I were a like virginal 25-year-old, or they often then go from appearance into like they go into cats a lot. Like, oh, I bet you have cats. Or a lot of times too, they assume I'm single, like that sort of, which is hilarious. Also, like just absolutely a hilarious dig, because I mean, what you're saying when you like call a woman like a cat lady is that men are so fucking worthless that just having like a ball of fluff that is around is a better companion than like any dude she's ever met. Like how is that an insult to the woman? Like, that's just like, wow, dudes fucking suck, man. I'd rather have this animal that will claw my face in an instant. That is a more pleasant prospect than literally any penis I have ever come across. Like that to me, that's not a slam on women.
Yeah, I like that. I don't know. Well, just going back to the comparison between, especially for someone like you who's a great writer, an original thinker and really funny, Twitter versus Instagram or TikTok is like the content of your character versus the appearance of your skin. It's almost like how you think you're judged really on just your writing, which is it's a great way to be judged. And then on TikTok or Instagram, when you're scrolling through, you see someone's face and you literally, maybe their body, whatever, you press play based on that. I want to see what this person has to say based on that. So they've already, and it's almost, by the way, it is just like stand up, because as a no-name comedian, and people don't know who you are, it's kind of the best kind of comedian to be because there are no expectations. When you walk up, people then judge, this guy is going to be blank or this woman is going to be blank, and then you have to fill in the words. But you get that quick judgment and people press play or don't, and it's got to be a very different experience for you with these different apps. And I just think that one is probably a lot better than another.
It really is a much different experience. And I find, like I said, I find TikTok still completely terrifying to me. And stand up is the scariest thing I can think of. Like that is my jumping out of a plane. Stand up is absolutely, it's so scary to me for that reason. And like, that's why like TikTok is like baby stand up, because I can do it. And then I can go like, delete. Like, I can't do that in real life. You can't stand there and be like, and now I don't exist anymore. Like, if I could do that, I'd probably be more willing to try stand up, but it is frightening. But in looking at TikToks, what has also been kind of like nice, and, I know everybody's TikTok, like what they see is different, but I keep seeing tons of people who are just themselves, who do not seem to be bothered by their physical presence. Like, they just point a camera at their face and just say whatever it is they want to say. Yeah. And they look however they happen to look at that moment in time. And that has actually been a little bit like, that's been kind of like freeing to see. I'm just like, look at these just people, they're not freaking out. They're not going, oh my God, my hair's out of place. Oh my God, I'm not wearing makeup.
Should be.
No, they should not. They are my inspiration. They're true north for me. I'm just like, I want to be that. I want to be able to walk through the world just unbothered by what anyone else might be thinking about me. That's it. Like, I think that's my enlightenment. When I hit that, I won't die. I'll just disappear into like a puff of smoke, and you can feel like she made it. She did it. She got there.
Do you think that you will find your enlightenment?
Absolutely not. Yeah, that's like an impossible mountain to me to climb, but I keep trying for some reason.
I've been reading I've been reading a lot of Buddhism lately, so I think about that a lot. I think about that word. I think about that idea.
Enlightenment.
Yeah, just whatever that means for any person. It's obviously, I would imagine, different.
What's yours?
People.
When do you disappear in a puff of smoke?
I already did. Did it all.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are you doing here?
Well, exactly.
Why are you sticking around?
I think, and I want to talk about this like more with Val and with other people, but like my daughter just turned 18. And so it's a kind of a weird, we kind of spontaneously started reviewing her life and our role in it and what we got right and didn't. And like, we gave ourselves like really great marks, and it's kind of an interesting thing to stage to be at and an exercise to do. But that in a way is a kind of stage of life. A huge part of my everyday for her last 18 years has been about Ava and trying to get things right. And I think we did I think we did a great job. So in a kind of a way, like she's almost out of here, and it's a kind of, I don't know, enlightenment, but fulfillment of a goal, of a hope that you had, that you'll be the person, the parent that you want to be. And I don't know what your reaction to that is. I'm changing the subject a little bit, but that's one way I look.
That's lovely, but I don't think you're done with that in any way at all. Like you're looking at who she is as a person now that she is a legal adult as defined by the state, right? Like 18 is meaningless. She's still a kid. I mean,
well, it's
I'm
not meaningless
commenting on her particularly because I don't know your daughter, but 18 is still.
It's not meaningless from the standpoint of like they move out of the house. I guess that's the threshold, and she's almost gone because come summer she'll be gone. She'll be a counselor.
Yeah, but then you're going to have a lot of years of being there for her in this like slightly different way, in the same way that like you were there for her when she was a baby and it was 24/7, but then they go to school, right? Like, and they're spending this whole part of their life getting these other influences with these other people, and you're not as big a role. And this is like the next sort of different step where you're still fully in their lives, but in this different kind of way. I think you'll have lots of moments to sort of reflect and kind of assess how things are. To the point of enlightenment, I think what I do, and I wonder if you do this, like looking at a phase of your life, a job, a relationship, an experience, your 20s, your college years, whatever. And if you are somewhat goal-oriented, for lack of a better idea, if at the end of that, you look back and say, hey, that was pretty good, or wow, that was terrible. I think I do a lot of that with relationships, with anybody. Wow. So you've looked back at periods of time in your life and been like, wow, that was pretty good. That's amazing. I've never done that. It's always like, I'm like running so far away from that period of time in my life. I can barely see it in the rearview mirror. And when I do, it's kind of like, oh, that's still on fire. Keep going. That's kind of how I look at every phase. You do look, you're saying you look back and you want to look away, or you're not. For like a second. I try real hard. No, I mean, I do. Of course, I look back. Of course, I spend a lot of time dwelling, but I do spend, I think, more time dwelling on, here were some other choices I could have made. Here's how maybe things could, and not in a like self-blamey way. The best thing that I ever learned from therapy, ever, the one thing I took away was, I was going through like, I should have done this, or I should have done that. And the therapist was just like, no, you did the only thing you could do based on your ability, your knowledge, what you knew, what you had at every point in your life. You have made the best possible choice for what you could do. If you could have made a different choice in that moment, you would have. You did what you had to do based on what you could do. Now you're a different person now than you were then. You have more information. You have more, you have different tools. And so if faced with it again, you can make a different choice, but you couldn't have done anything but what you did. And that was a very like freeing kind of feeling of, oh yeah, right. Like, how would I have come to a different conclusion? I came to the only, it's the past is now faded. It's already been done. I did everything I could possibly do. And I don't think of myself as an evil idiot. So like, I did the best I could at the time. And sometimes that sucked. And I hope to do better in different ways in the future. But I can't look back and go, oh yeah, but I should have. That's been a very like freeing thing. Yeah, for me. It's a great lesson. I feel like I too, and it was a therapist that introduced like the idea of never
don't should yourself or others. Shoulding is like a real judgment or it's unhelpful. The way you're saying it says it's unhelpful. What were you supposed to do? You did what you thought you should do in that moment. And if you didn't, you realize in the next, I'm going back to, raising kids. I'm certain my daughter has made a handful of choices that she wished she didn't or shouldn't have. But I'm glad that she had those experiences, because the next time she's in that situation, listen to me, shortening words. I don't want to be that guy.
I know. Now you are hanging out with an 18-year-old.
I really am. Yeah. She said, my 18-year-old, by the way, said about this dude last night. They went out in the city to celebrate her birthday, her and her friends. She's like, yeah, he had pretty good chat. And I was like, what is that?
Nice. I like it. Bet.
Yeah. A chat. He had pretty good chat. I'm like, all right, I guess I could use that. Can we lift that? Yeah, he's pretty good. Real. He had pretty good chat. Game. I guess it's like game. Anyway.
I don't think it's like game. No. Game is a different thing.
Then chat, really, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I think game is the whole vibe, right? Like game is like everything.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Chat is much more like your conversation. He was good. Like he was good to talk to.
What advice would you give to an 18-year-old based on your life?
Oh boy. It's something I actually get asked a lot because I talk to lots of like groups of young, for various reasons.
Can I add something to that question people. Specific to you?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I was just, because I'm doing this new segment here on the show where and maybe people that you could suggest, talk to young people, Gen Z people. It's been really fascinating. And one thing that I keep finding and that we've all dealt with is this idea that you're at 18 or 19 or whatever, your 20s, and that you're supposed to know what you're going to do the rest of your life career-wise. You have had a bunch of different things that you've done in your life, like different lives, and I think that's great. Yeah. I was telling this young woman I was talking to, I was like, I think that's great to have something that you do for a while over here that you like and that you learn, and then another thing, as opposed to like one. There's pros and cons, there's trade-offs, but I actually think it's totally normal to not know what you want to do, and probably good to do several different things. And I know you have, so that's why I wanted to throw that in.
No, yeah, I've done all sorts of things. My career path has followed absolutely no line whatsoever.
You were an iron worker, and yet you never talk about that part of your life.
For a while I raised bees, and then I flew planes in World War II. It was a confusing time warp situation, but yeah,
I didn't know
I've done quite a lot.
Traveled time. I had no idea about that. You should talk about that on your TikToks.
People get really excited, and I just, it's like, chill out. I tried the Hitler thing, but it's like, he's a baby, man. I mean, it's a little much to ask.
Wow, we have you to blame. Damn.
Oh God, for literally everything. I can't believe you're just catching up now, but it's okay, because I'm going to go back in time and change this whole fucking interview. You have no idea. No, I have absolutely traveled a very weird and winding path, and I think the things that have worked for me have been, one, putting it out there. Like when there's something that I see that I'm interested in, that I want to do, or I want to change my situation, like the thing that I honestly believe has been most successful has actually just been telling people that, like whatever it is, like, hey, I really think that's really neat and I want to do that. And you just tell people that, and you keep telling people that, and you keep talking about it. I mean, you do it too, like you do whatever steps, but I feel as though it has sort of these two positive effects. One, it starts to cement this thought in your mind into a possibility, because the more you're saying it to people, the more real it becomes, the more it becomes something that you actually can see happening. So it's a way of like kind of projecting out and accepting it for yourself. And then the other is that, we need people. Like that's the best way to kind of move forward, is then finding people who go, hey, actually, there's some stuff I could help you with that, or I can talk to you about that, or I know some places, or I know some things. Like the more you're sort of, call it networking if you want, but like the more you're making those human connections and stating what it is you want at any given moment, the more achievable I think it becomes to actually do that. Because so often there's just stuff we hold in our heads, like someday I want to, I hope I get to. And it just lives there as this like really irritating little pest somewhere in our brains, and can really frustrate us because we can't seem to actualize it. And I think just speaking it aloud as often as possible, especially to people with similar beliefs or similar, places in their lives or things they want to do, can be really helpful and can really kind of move us forward.
Yeah, being your own PR campaign for whatever your intentions are in your career, or who you'd like to meet, or what kind of job or experience you'd like to have is a great idea. And you can do that on social media, on the internet now, a lot easier than we could, when we were growing up, I think, probably. Like, I want to be a comedian.
It's not like a magic, sort of thing. It's not like a bewitched wrinkle your nose and now you're that. I mean, I would love that. I've been practicing wrinkling my nose for absolutely ever and still have never been able to manifest anything from it. But it is kind of like, it does get you a little bit closer every time. So I think I think that's one thing. And then the other is that in general in life, and like, this is one of those pieces of advice that if you take it in the wrong place in the wrong time, it's just terrible. It's going to wreck everything. But if you take it in the way I intend it, it is saying yes more often than I say no to things. Like, even when I'm scared, even when I'm nervous, but if I have a general feeling, like if there's something about it that makes me feel like, yeah, but I kind of want to, saying yes, even when there's like a voice being like, it's time, that's like self-defeating, pushing through that and saying yes has been a really like a positive, good thing for me. They're kind of like, what I'm like writing a meditation daily calendar or something here, but for real, those are actual things that have helped me.
I wonder, I lately have been getting back into kind of mentoring. I hired an intern and I've been talking to these younger people, and it's really reminding me of how important that is and how much purpose and fulfillment it gives me. And I miss, I used to do that at Sirius. I worked at corporate media. You had interns, you had younger people around you, and now I'm in my fucking shed every day. But do you do that? You'd be a great mentor for anyone.
God, it is so important to always be reaching out to younger people, because eventually I expect to not work in any way, and I want them to take care of me. I want them to be like, gosh, I remember how she was just really good to me. And then they just are like, hey, let me just give you some cash to just stand by the door and smile at people. I feel pity for you. I'm trying to generate as much pity from the younger generations as possible.
I think you're missing the mark by going straight for cash and being less, like a little more subtle about other resources or even property.
No. Eventually, I'm going to be like, I rely on you during the water wars to like make sure that I still have something to drink, because I can't go out there and fight the hordes down at the river. But like, you remember when I helped you? You remember when I gave you that little piece of life advice back when you were an intern, like, and you feel a little bit obligated. I know some people like have kids for that, but like, that's too difficult. I am trying to see as many.
That advice, crank that pump, fill up my bucket. Mama thirsty.
That's right. You cried to me about some dude you were dating, and I was just like, oh, honey, there's so many. And now you feel a sense of obligation to me, and that's what I'm trying to engender.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. So do you have a regular way that you might meet people that you could mentor? Do you mentor people on a regular? Is it more spontaneous? People reach out to you?
I don't know. I know. No one's ever asked me to mentor them, and I think I'd probably laugh a bit. But I have offered multiple times, because I get I've spoken to groups of interns at organizations. Organizations have had me come in and talk to their interns, and I'm happy to do that. And I actually just had a university professor who asked if I'd speak to his students. Awesome. I'm happy to do that. But I've never tried to foster any one-on-one. I have tried to make myself very accessible, especially for younger women. Because I find that young men have no problem asking me for help or advice anytime, any moment of any day. And that's great. And I'm always happy to help them. But I always feel like, I want to encourage younger women to please reach out, because I feel as though they might be a little more hesitant or, don't want to intrude. Or maybe they're just smarter and recognize that there's nothing I can do for them, which that's fine too. But, I'd like to help if they need it.
I'm going to pimp you out as a mentor.
Sure.
And have people pay you. I mean, you've certainly given me plenty of good advice over the years.
That makes no sense.
Yeah, as a mentor, people are life coaches, for God's sake. I think that's actually a good, I don't make fun of that. It's so easy to make fun of.
No, I want a life coach. No, I'm the opposite side. I'm looking for someone who can I pay to get this shit together.
But you want someone to be your life coach. Yeah.
Pretty.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that you are a person who gives, shares a lot of wisdom. You might not even take some of your own, I suppose. But I mean, I can't think of an example of that. But
Oh, no, I'm much better at giving other people advice than giving myself advice. I know exactly what everyone should do. I know exactly what I should do. It's just that I don't want to do it. But like you should do it. You're going to be a lot happier, while I sit here going, yeah, that would have been a smart thing for me to do. I just did the exact opposite of that, but that's fine.
But there's
somebody has to try out the bad ideas too.
Well, I mean, we can have a lot of fun with this as a bit idea, as a premise. But the truth is, there are lots of people who are really good coaches or teachers that maybe haven't been able to practice themselves. I mean, there's amazing acting teachers or writing teachers who haven't necessarily made a lot of money as actors or writers for any number of reasons. So I don't think there's any way a contradiction or a hypocrisy about it.
No, you're absolutely right. It is its own skill set to be able to communicate to people in a way that they need to hear, in a way that they're willing to hear, and to sort of connect with where they are in life and what they're going through and how. I mean, like that is its own skill set. That is absolutely true.
Well, the Maura mentorship.
I value it.
The Maura mentorship program is launching next week, everybody, on. I don't know what platform we will launch it on, but sign up for your one-on-one.
All right, Great. Are you signing up? Is that what this is?
Oh, I signed up for a long time ago. I've gotten plenty of wisdom from you and ideas. You heard her.
I think my favorite thing ever was once when I asked you, I was like, we were having a conversation, or I was sending you a video and I was going through some stuff and I was just like, I don't know what to do. And you sent me back this video, Pete, where you just stared at the camera for like a full 5 to 10 seconds. And then you're like, I don't know what to tell you. You're the person I go to for advice. So what I'm saying is, think about what you would tell me if I was telling you any of this, and then do that. And honestly, it was super helpful. It was like, oh, yeah, he's right. That's actually exactly right.
Yeah, it really felt. I remember how uneasy I felt and how like
you looked so panicked.
Oh God, it was just like, man, I've gone to Maura in a couple panics, more than a couple, and she calms me down and gives me great advice. And now she's coming to me, and I was like, what? I bet you should just talk to yourself. Just go re-listen to that. Re-listen to that. Pretend it's me talking or anybody else, and tell that person whatever you would tell them. Tell yourself whatever you. But
here's the thing, Pete. I did. I played back my own message, and then I was like, "Yeah, no. Here's what I would tell that person." That's exactly what I did.
And then we didn't talk for 2 months.
The exact opposite of what my. Yeah, exactly.
That's right. I'm the therapist everybody should have, where I just like, one time I give you one tip, and it's listen, in this case, listen to yourself, and then you never come back. You don't talk forever because you got all the advice you needed. All right, let's quickly just your reactions to some things in the news we could have fun with, and then I'll let you go. Of course.
What is happening? Yeah.
Well, there's a clip out this morning of George Santos walking through the airport. And when you think of all of the lies that he's told, which ones are the kind of most offensive to a huge group of people, like saying that you're Jewish or saying that you're gay or not, or whatever, like for purposes of making yourself more the worst does seem to be, and this has been this way for 22 years, saying that you were in or around 9/11. So dude said his mom died in 9/11, and there's a clip out there, I don't know if you saw it, but a reporter walking next to him as he's walking through the airport, and she just keeps asking him, did your mother die in the towers on 9/11? Was your mother in? And then apparently he said that she died later as a result of, breathing the air. But we find out today that his mom wasn't in New York on 9/11, according to immigration papers. But the problem, he could clear that up with the answer. He doesn't answer it. I feel like that's exactly what a reporter should be asking over and over. Until you answer that, you don't get to answer anything, and you don't certainly get to be on the space committee that he's on. But I'm pretty obsessed with that story for obvious reasons that anybody else did. Any thoughts about him and what's happening there?
Well, I mean, it's so tricky because like if you step back completely out of like, oh, this is a terrible person who's literally in our political system having any say in what's going on. It is fucking like, it's like you would watch that movie in a second. Like you would watch every single detail, and you'd probably even be kind of rooting for him. Like depending on how they colored it, you'd just be like, yeah, that's fucking amazing. It would be like, you'd be a little bit on his side. And that's where it's like, there's a point where the audacity just gets so incredibly big. It's like, I don't even care that I'm looking at a giant pile of shit. It's still the size of the Grand Canyon. And I'm still impressed by that. Like that's actually kind of amazing, even if it is also the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. That's how I feel about every part of that story. It's like both at every moment, all times.
Anything else that you're paying attention to at all in the world, in the news, about anything? Any other outrages that you want to share with us? Because I always like it when you get outraged about anything, but I should be...
I've been like very, very detached from all of it, except for the work that I've been doing, which is just fully focused on all the econ tax shit that is absolutely just infuriating. We are looking right now. I know this is really exciting stuff, but this is the world
I'm always happy to hear you talk about your work. Go ahead.
So in 2017, the only thing, when Republicans had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, the only thing that they did was pass this fucking tax law, this 2017 GOP Trump tax law, which was a massive giveaway to huge corporations and to the rich. And they fiddled with all the numbers to try and be like, no, it's not going to hurt it's not going to like skyrocket the debt, which is they also pretend to care about. And they did that by making a bunch of the tax cuts, they only made them like for 5 years. And that way they didn't have to factor in the full cost of what they would cost if they went out the 10 years. They can say, oh, no, it's half of that. It doesn't cost as much because, it expires in 5 years. And they had every intention then of just letting it get to the 5 years and then extend it. And that's where we are right now. The Republicans are looking to extend these massive corporate tax cuts, these tax giveaways. And, they're going with all the same sort of like, it's necessary for corporations to survive. Meanwhile, at the same time, we have all this like, we're seeing egg prices go up and all of these corporations are making massive money off of increasing the cost of eggs. Like they don't need these extra dumb fucking giveaways that are just these massive, massive costs. And if we because Republicans right now have this pay cut rule where rather than the Dems pay go, it's pay cut where they cut things to keep the deficit down. So they want to increase the cost, which is what these tax cuts do. And then they have to offset it by cutting programs that people need. That's what they're looking to do. They're being real shady about it. They don't like to say they're coming for Social Security and Medicare, but when you actually look down at what they're drilling into the policy, of course they want to come for Social Security and Medicare. They've been doing a ton of work lately in calling those programs entitlements because they're trying to make sure they're trying to seed the ground that like, it's these goddamn entitled people who aren't working, just more of their sort of PR entitled to pave the way for all of these things.
There's some accuracy about the word entitlement. I was looking at my daughter's first paycheck from her job at the coffee shop, and they take out money for Social Security and Medicare. She's entitled to get that money back. That's it's not a...
She is, but we have a negative connotation on the word entitlement. Right. So yes, from a definition Webster standpoint, yes, the definition of it, yes, you could give that paper, but we have accepted that that's something that people don't actually deserve. Whereas it's called Social Security. It's called Social Security for a reason. It is a way to ensure that we have a secure social network for people. It is not a sort of giveaway for the lazy and the weak, which is what they want to paint it as.
Well, how closely are you following these debt ceiling negotiations? Because the result could be, as it was, I think, years ago, that the Democrats have to agree to some kind of spending cut that really will hurt the American people very badly. And I'm everybody's saying we're not going to default. Don't worry about it. But yeah, that's because they might come to a deal where they cut something that's really important. I'm very concerned about that.
We're watching it closely. I mean, I'm watching it closely, and we, as I think an econ sector, are watching it closely. And frankly, the Dems should not negotiate on this. And here is why. If there is no agreement on the debt ceiling, we shut down government, we shut things down. That has a massive impact on our economy at large, and it has an impact on businesses. And ultimately, if it is at that precipice where there is just nothing happening, one option or one outcome is that Dems could say, fine, what do you want to negotiate on? Fine, we can't let this happen. We have to give something. But another option is Dems just fully win that game of chicken, stare it down in the face. And what will happen, because it has happened before, is Republicans are going to start getting calls from corporate donors saying, you guys got to do something. You're going to fuck us over. This is going to hurt our bottom line. You can't do this. They are going to lose that game of chicken because their donors are going to come for them. And Dems need to hold a real strong line on that and not get scared, not flinch, not do anything else. That is incredibly, incredibly important right now. So anyone who's talking to their reps and senators, this is make sure that they are holding strong. There is no reason to negotiate on the deadline.
That is great advice and a awesome place to press stop. Thank you so much, Maura. I'm going to cut that out and outsource it to the world. Everybody needs to hear that last thing.
Yeah, let's send more people for me.
And then you can mentor them all. Thank you, Maura Quint.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, how about it? Maura Quint, everybody. Go check her out on TikTok. Follow her if you do the TikToks. And, of course, on Twitter at Behind Your Back. And let her know that you heard her here on the show. Always makes a huge difference to me, to the show, and, of course, to Maura. Now it's time to get to my second guest, who I'm very, very excited to have back on the show. She is an excellent, excellent journalist. She does accountability journalism for the climate crisis at Heated.Word, where she's just hired another journalist, R.L. Samuelson, which is really cool. But I love this on her website. It says, it's not your fault that the planet's burning. Your air conditioner, your hamburger, your gas-powered car, these aren't the reasons we only have about a decade to prevent irreversible climate catastrophe. No, majority of the blame for the climate emergency lies at the foot of the greedy, the cowardly, the power-hungry, the apathetic. That's why I created this newsletter, to expose and explain the forces behind past and present inaction on the most existential threat of our time. If you sign up, you'll get original reporting and analysis on the climate crisis at the top of your inbox every week. News on this emergency deserves to be at the top of your inbox. It should arm you with the knowledge you need to effectively fight this crisis. And we should always probably have a little fun while we're fighting, so there will be some fun things too. Maybe drag queens. That's what she writes at Heated.Word. She's really simply one of the best. I love talking to her. It was great catching up with her. The latest, you gotta subscribe. Go to Heated.Word, where Emily Atkin is the editor-in-chief now with reporter Ariel Samuelson. And follow Emily on Twitter at Emorwee, EMORWEE. Look for all of that information in the show links. Here we go. Emily Atkin is back. And please forgive me for my very awkward first question, the clunkiness of the first question. But she was so thoughtful, and she went right back to it and answered it the way she wanted to, which I love. Here we go. There she is. Emily is joining us now, and it's been way too long, and I am so happy to see you, one of my favorite reporters working, period. It's great to see you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's a real sign that I'm back to work being on your show. It feels like back to normal.
That's interesting. Yeah, because we were talking a bunch when you first launched Heated. And maybe, I'd interviewed you even before, I think, when you're at the New Republic. I've been following your work for a long time. I was looking at your website. Of course, I'm a paid subscriber, and I love to say that because I pretty much follow all of your work and everything that you're doing. Know that you've got this new journalist that you've hired, lots to talk about with you. But one of your top stories ever read was a very personal one, titled something about your own resilience, which was a little while back when you took some time off. And I just thought that was the most impressive thing to do transparently. How are you doing? You're back to work. You got this new employee. Are you able to do it? What's going on?
Well, am I able to do it?
That was a weird wording of the question. Like, you're back working, you're doing great work, you've hired somebody. I was really impressed that you were able to take that time off. How are you doing? How about that?
I'm doing well. It was actually, I kind of want to answer, like, am I able to do it? Because I now think of doing it a bit differently. I think of reporting and writing and operating a newsletter and being a good reporter differently than I did before I took a break. I so appreciate when people tell me that, they think it was very brave or inspiring of me to take a break from work and to be so transparent about the burnout and mental health reasons that I did it. But the reality was that I kind of didn't have a choice at that point. I had let myself get into such a state of burnout that it was really the only thing that I could do. at that point. I needed to stop. The way that I was approaching the newsletter and my work was not sustainable. And I think I just had this realization that for somebody that was covering climate change, which is essentially about how to build a sustainable world, I couldn't really do that correctly if I didn't have sustainable systems in place for myself. So I decided to take as long as it sort of needed to take, with the caveat that I couldn't afford to do that forever. But, I thought maybe it would take like 3 months. Turned out it took more about 6 months. And even after that, it was an adjustment to come back and then also try and work in a way that felt not soul sucking and not all consuming. And I think hiring Ariel, my new reporter, was such a big part in helping me feel back in the groove again. I think collaboration and, in my case, mentorship is like such it's such a motivating factor for me. It really helps me get in the game. So you mentioned being a paid subscriber. Like, Heated is only paid for by subscribers. There's no ads or anything. So it was really awesome that even after a 6-month break, I could come back and still have enough revenue coming in to be like, okay, I think I can hire somebody. And it has she's been here for 3 weeks and it's helped immensely.
Congratulations. Thanks for sharing that. I think you so eloquently, and you wrote about it in that piece about resilience, about if you're going to have sustainability and have sustainable systems, you have to have a sustainable practice, daily life. And you just spoke to it really, really eloquently. And I love that. And I'm so happy to hear all of that. I mean, I think that what is great about you is we know your character, but we also know your ethics. Of course, you were mentored yourself by Wayne Barrett. People know that. People know that you don't take ads. And so my question to you is, I'm trying to do the same thing. I think that's important. It's hard to do for a lot of different reasons. But how do you, I know the word isn't compete, but how do you sustain this model in competition with the Washington Post, New York Times climate reporters, and all of the rest that have corporate backing and big ad money? How do you see the difference?
Well, at first, I mean, I don't even really see them as my competitors, because I see what I offer as something completely different. I see the market for what I offer to be completely different, because essentially, how is corporate backed news my competition, right? Like, I am actively marketing, reporting as independent of ads, independent of corporate sponsorships, independent of fossil fuel propaganda. This is like a place for people that want news from that kind of publication. And I also, the Washington Post and the New York Times and even NPR that, takes some corporate dollars in addition to being a public media. I don't think that my reporting should be in substitute to their reporting. Those are newsrooms that have massive resources and they can do things that I can't. They have they can pursue stories that I might not have the time to. I think it's sort of like what I'm doing should be in kind of like to the side, like a complement, like two things on a dinner plate, right? Like a vegetable and a starch.
Which are you? You're the vegetable.
I don't know. I think that I'm the starch because I think I'm more fun. Right? Like I think that I'm the part that people would actually more enjoy.
Yeah.
Because I don't have all of these limitations on what I can say and how I can describe things. And I can be very blunt about how I feel about things. And I would say, however, that the competition that I have among independent journalists is among other independent journalists. And that competition is certainly increasing, has certainly increased over the last 6 months that I was out, from February to August. And I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the pressure. The subscriber numbers are not jotting up the way they used to because there's so many really good climate Substacks and other independent journalists. And that's a good problem for me to have. I'm not mad about it.
Yeah. And you're also willing, obviously, to collaborate with others as you have as well. So there's probably...
Well, yeah, it's almost like I need to collaborate at this point because it's way more fun.
So getting to tying this into some of your reporting, I mean, this new news organization, Semaphore, I'm
pretty sure, yeah.
Correct me if I have this right.
You just read about it, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You were reading their stuff and you see that there's a Chevron ad on the page, on the web page, the same web page as their climate reporting. And you call that out. I actually did this too with, a lot of people, but like ABC News is a daily podcast, and the guy was doing live reads for, I think, Chevron or Shell. And I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You can't do climate reporting and then do that live read. It's the same thing, same problem. I think most people see that problem. But you asked about that, and it led to some really interesting things. But the reporter who also asked to have it removed just resigned, apparently. The climate reporter left Semaphore because they wouldn't take his those ads off his page or out of the site. Tell me why that's so important.
Well, you can't do journalism without the journalists. And there's always this kind of excuse that I think a lot of journalists will give that, it's not in my control what ads are on my coverage. That's a decision by the editorial team. And you can just be like, well, that's how it is. I don't have any control over that. I understand that there's so much behind that. Like, you got to put food on the table, right? Yep. But at the same time, this is sort of a profession that demands some kind of like moral standard for you to have, or at least should. At least that's what I was kind of sold when I was told about what journalism was, which was that it's a public service in the same way that, serving in government should be a public service. So you should hold yourself to like some moral standards. And what I loved about the idea that Bill Spindle, the former climate reporter for Semaphore, what he did was he was kind of like, I can't continue to do this kind of reporting if this propaganda for the thing that's causing all the problems that I detail in my reporting is going to be next to it. Like, I can't be associated with that. And I think that's very powerful. And I think I think that journalists tend to be like afraid to exercise that kind of power. I think if more journalists did exercise that power, then we would not see as many fossil fuel advertisements on climate change coverage on the internet and everywhere. It's sort of like seeing ads for guns on a newsletter about shootings and gun violence. It's like, oh, and like the gun ads say like, we're helping reduce gun violence. And you're like, are you? Are you?
I don't know about that.
I don't know, but it's right next to this journalism I trust. So it must be, it can't be total bullshit, right? Maybe gun companies are helping reduce gun violence. That's sort of like the risk of those ads, right? Is that people are actually like, oh, well, I guess oil companies are helping solve climate change and all this stuff that's in this newsletter about how terrible climate change is. I guess I don't really need to worry about it because like the oil companies have it under control, it seems.
They definitely are trying to have it under control. Not the answer, but the continued profiting. And we've got a lot to talk about that because you cover it as well as anybody else. I just thought that was really important to talk about reporting in general. You have a lot to say about what a free press should be like and kind of the moral clarity. And I was also interested to hear, Ariel, your new reporter's point of view on that. She's obviously really, really smart. I don't know how many people like you talk to, but you obviously found a really very intelligent person. And so I think it's important to talk about the integrity of the reporting, who funds the reporting, and you've done a great job at covering that now at Heated. And I just wanted to start quickly with we've already started, but specifically in reporting about this new story, new study that has come out recently that makes it painfully clear, as Bill McKibben writes, how much and how precisely Exxon understood climate change back in the days when it could have made a huge difference if they'd simply been honest. Just anything that you want to say, or any of your reporting about how they continue to do everything they can to sell us these things that they've known forever are really, really bad for the planet, for the atmosphere, for our health.
This is the whole reason that I started my newsletter, right? This is the whole reason that back in 2019, I sort of got really fed up with how I think most mainstream news outlets at the time were covering climate change as sort of this amalgamous thing that we were all responsible for.
Right.
And that it was like sort of all of our problem to fix, and it made you feel really bad on an individual level for every single choice you made. And this research that continues to come out that Naomi Oreskes and Jeffrey Supron continue to put out, delving into how, in their case, Exxon has known for so long what their primary products would do to the planet. It's just this huge piece of mounting evidence that this is not a problem that is happening to us, climate change. It's something that's being done to us knowingly by people who profit from it happening. And I think that as much attention as it gets, I'm so heartened to see how much attention it's getting. It should get even more attention. It should drive even more outrage to know that for so many years, the extent of these trillion-dollar enterprises that they've known that continuing to extract and burn these products at an increasing rate would cause devastating, deadly impacts for particularly for the world's most vulnerable people. And instead of really choosing to grapple with that, instead chose to conceal it, continue it, and become exceedingly rich off of it, thereby making it so that they're protected from any devastating climate impact that may befall them. People think that wealth can't protect you from climate change. That's false. It can. And continue to deny that that's what they've been doing the whole time. If you go to Exxon spends tens of millions of dollars in PR every single year to build their own websites that kind of try to refute these narratives that are laid out in the research of Exxon's own documents, to be like, we never did that. We're totally not doing that. One of the things I would love to be able to do one day is talk to somebody who works there about how you morally square that with yourself, how you really justify that kind of corporate activity and behavior, because it's still so baffling to me.
Do you think there's a difference? This is just deep. I don't know how you think about it, but do you think that there's a difference between executives who are, doing terrible things and selling misinformation and everything that they're doing versus the guy who works in the mine or on the rig? I mean, I got a longtime listener who works in coal mines, and he's terribly miserable about every part of it, but it's a job. They're one of the only ones in Wyoming that's allowed him to support his family. He's tried forever to try to find something else. They've tried different things, and they've got all kinds of issues. The insurance helps him with his, there's just so much nuance for the average worker in these dirty energy companies. But do you see a difference?
Anyone who doesn't see a difference doesn't know what they're talking about. There's a massive difference between the guy, a woman or man working on the oil rig or in the coal mine and the executive raking in the profits from their labor. It may be the best job that person can get. However, the executives are raking in far more profit from their labor than what they're actually making. And of course, there are built-in risks to working on an oil rig, working or on a derrick, or working in a coal mine, specifically a lot of health risks, a lot of occupational safety risks that are not, that are potentially not built into the salary of those jobs. And I'm not saying they're not good jobs and that people shouldn't take them if they're the only thing that is offered to them, but it's also why why are those jobs the only jobs that are available? And that is also because there's a lot of resistance from like big oil companies and the politicians that they fund to bringing in other industries, specifically renewable industries, and having those jobs come in and diversify economies as well. I think workers get taken advantage of by their corporations all the time, and the oil industry is no different than anywhere else. It's also not to say that like some people working in the oil industry aren't like super happy with their jobs. That's fine, but that's like blaming, I don't know, it's like blaming everybody, individual people, for the fact that they're climate deniers. I don't really like to do that, and I don't think it's generally right, because people are climate deniers because they've been fed disinformation by, really powerful people in the media and the right wing, the TV sphere, right wing politicians. How can you blame them for people that they are supposed to be people that they can trust for believing them? I don't blame them. I blame the people that spew the disinformation, that create the disinformation, that profit from the disinformation.
Well, let's talk about them, because you've been doing amazing reporting on those people and those organizations for your entire career. And most recently talking about the natural gas industry, talking about this nonprofit that is creating mis and disinformation and fear amongst the folks on the Jersey Shore, where they're wanting to put up a wind farm. It's really interesting. I've been digging deep into it all morning, and it's fascinating and really, really enraging. But you've got your most recent piece is about why gas stoves actually matter, and we can't get into all of it. Everybody should go subscribe and read it, because I interviewed Colin Gerald-Mack this week, who's an author and academic at NYU, all about the industry. But this piece adds so much to that. It's certainly worth reading. But to the question about what the natural gas industry has done, because we're kind of talking about the oil industry, mentioned coal. We can talk about any of them. I just mentioned what they're trying to do to scare people about wind farms. What about the natural gas industry? I mean, they all kind of collude with each other and trade organizations to lobby policymakers, don't they?
Well, look, I mean, they're all kind of lobbying for the same thing, which is the continued extraction of fossil fuels. And so they have very similar priorities, very similar talking points, and then they all kind of have the same trade associations that they're kind of all members for, that do a lot of the dirty political work for them. So for example, one story that Ariel and I just reported on was how this trade industry, the American fuel and petrochemical manufacturers, which sort of represents all of the oil and gas refining industry companies, right? That they were getting Edelman, the biggest PR firm in the world, to do all this like slick pro fossil fuel work. And that might not be like to say like, oh, fossil fuels they do this for you and they do this for you. And there's so many, and like, really just flashy stuff. And that's all that. It's not about any one particular fossil fuel, right? That campaign. And the companies that pay into AFPM aren't just gas companies, aren't just oil companies. Like, there's all different kinds of companies that pay into and want to create, just to paid billions of dollars into that idea, selling that idea that fossil fuels are necessary for you to have a good life, and that and also that you cannot have a good life without them, and that if you replaced them in any way, then really bad things are going to happen to you, which isn't true. But in many ways, you could argue because of climate change, it's the opposite. Yeah. But also, that's another thing that they all have in common, is that they never want to talk about climate change.
The other thing that you see being done, in addition to those two denying, just not having the conversation, funding a propaganda effort to make themselves sound great and make us all dependable on them, and obviously get incentives that allow them to exist and so on. The other thing that they often do is, and you hear this a lot, and I just wanted to get your take on this, is they demonize the solutions. And it's fairly effective, because it's not wrong that there are drawbacks with lithium battery-powered cars. It's not wrong that there are disadvantages or bad things happen with wind farms or solar panels. They all draw natural resources and require energy to be built and to be operated. There's no doubt about that. But the humans we're dirty. There's a lot of us. We use this energy. There's no perfect solution, but clearly these are so much better in every way for the environment and natural and human environment. But they make those arguments and they make them effectively. And that's happening right now on the Jersey Shore. They're saying the windmills are killing the whales. And it's like, you don't fucking care about the whales. You should care. You would chop a whale up and serve it at your kid's 13th birthday party or whatever. I mean, like, you don't care about the whales. This is just a way to create doubt. And obviously, there's always with wind farms the argument about the eyesore. Your reporting talks about Nantucket and more. Tell me a little bit more about that argument, that technique to make the solutions look really terrible.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because you don't give a fuck about the whales. No, you don't.
They don't. They would ride them. They would ride them around. They would domesticate them. They would do if they could make money, seriously, off of killing whales, they would have no problem with it. It's preposterous to think that those two people are the same people.
Yeah, it's a very clever form of lying. And it's becoming far more popular with some of these trade groups and fossil fuel industry backed conservative nonprofits. The article that you were mentioning, I think, is the one that Michael Thomas from the Distilled newsletter and I wrote about the Texas Public Policy Foundation, which is a conservative nonprofit in Texas, funded by a bunch of oil companies, among other companies. And their big push has been to try and file a lawsuit against this offshore wind farm off the coast of Massachusetts because it hurts the whales, which is, violates the Endangered Species Act, which is hilarious because the TPPF, this nonprofit, has been advocating against the Endangered Species Act for its entire.
Oh, no way. I just made the assumption they've literally been advocating against whales.
The lawyer that is representing TPPF and it's on behalf of commercial fishermen who are afraid of wind farms harming their fisheries, which is a real issue. But the lawyer that's kind of taking charge of the lawsuit has been the same lawyer that literally wrote in an op-ed that for The Hill, I forget the exact quote, but it's really good. It's extinction is natural. We should just let things die, right? This Endangered Species Act is ridiculous type thing. And it's just so completely disingenuous, but that's the whole point, right? Because they never care about how oil and gas operations affect whales or affect wildlife or affect birds, right? You'll remember all of the hubbub about how windmills kill birds. And then you actually look at the data and first of all, yeah, windmills do kill birds. Oil and gas operations kill way more birds. Okay. And then cats kill 40 times as many birds, right? They don't care about birds. They care about bucking up renewable energy and ensuring that we still really rely on oil and gas and coal to power America. And one thing also I would add is that I would really challenge you to look at any local anti-solar, anti-wind effort that might be happening in your area. And just that looks like it's super grassroots, and see if there's been any reporting on if it's actually a grassroots organization or if it's actually an astroturfing group funded by the oil and gas industry, because 9 times out of 10, that's actually what it is. And there are far more out there because it's really a strategy that's been proliferating in the last couple of years that haven't been uncovered. And a lot of reporting is being done on that. I just mentioned Michael Thomas at the Distilled newsletter. He's been doing a lot of that. I hope to be doing more of that. I think it's a huge emerging trend of oil and gas companies pretending to be concerned citizens group about the environment to be like, look at this awful wind turbine. Like that's happening.
No, I mean, it's really important. And I see that in that post, you do write about how they were lobbying against the Endangered Species Act while also funding groups that are, quote, concerned about whales. And in that piece, I think it was that piece also, people have said that one of the concerns, which is a legitimate concern for a coastal economy that gets a lot of their money through tourism, is that windmills will somehow hurt that. And there's not a lot of research on it, but you write about where it does exist. Things got better even after the wind farms went up. So that's not a good talking point either. They try to come up with everything. They throw everything they can out there, and it's effective.
Here's the thing, too, that's really complicated and frustrating about all that, right? Is that the Commercial Fishermen's Association, that have concerns about Cape Wind and other offshore wind farms, their concerns are valid, right? The environmental concerns about solar panels, about rare earth mineral mining, about so many of these problems, they're valid. No, clean energy is sort of like a false moniker because no energy is clean, and there are environmental problems associated with all of it. And so the question is, are there ways to mitigate those problems that allow us to still have energy and do the least harm possible, right? Because harm is bound to happen either way.
No matter what.
And there are a bunch of actually genuine groups and efforts to mitigate the impacts, but they get of renewable energy, particularly in this case, the offshore wind farms, but they get overtaken by this fear-mongering propaganda that gets spread by these oil and gas funded conservative groups that make people think that there's no way to mitigate it. And we just have to keep the status quo because this thing is going to come into your life and completely fuck it up and completely fuck up everything. And there's definitely no way. Like, don't you just want to live with the problems you have rather than just like create new ones?
Well, yeah, there's that, but there's also the component, don't you think, of people, especially, I mean, it's every single time, but with these gas stoves, not going to take my gas stove. It's just this idea that you're not going to take something from me. You're not going to tell me what to do, what to drive, how to cook. It's this idea that government is controlling your life. I feel like I always hear that attitude, and I have a pithy response. Well, somebody's got to tell you how to live because you're destroying everything in the neighborhood. I'm sorry.
I was just thinking about this today, literally in the shower. I was thinking to myself about a pithy response to that argument too. And my pithy response I thought of was like, look, if you don't care about other people, just say that. If you don't think climate change is real and you don't want to take steps to mitigate that for, people who might be more vulnerable than you, just say that. Don't create some fake allegiance to a stove that you have never used. Your wife is cooked for you every single day. Yeah. You don't know what kind of fucking stove you use, Ted Cruz. Okay. Like, if you don't care about other people, just say that. Like all of these things are just, they're just ways to disguise what all of these people, all of these Republicans who are freaking out about gas stoves are actually trying to say, which is, I don't care about climate change. I don't think it's real. I would rather appease my fossil fuel donors than do anything to solve it. I'm going to make it about a culture war, though, because it's really not appeasing. It really doesn't sound nice for me to be like, I don't give a fuck about this. And that's what gets me as a journalist so riled up about it, because I'm just like, can you just be honest with us? Stop making up this fake stuff about what you really care about. You really care about your gas stove. Liberals are the ones that own gas stoves. I don't know if you've seen that research, but like most of the gas stove ownership in the country is in like New York and California and like all these blue states.
Because liberals live in cities, and cities all have gas dependent buildings and stuff, right?
And because a lot of the propaganda of gas stoves has been targeted to kind of more upscale, glamorous, wine and cheese and fine dining, we only use gas stoves, right? So it's like seen as a luxury item. It's never been like an economical item. You would think that conservatives who have sort of been more into like theoretically into like saving money and like efficiency, you would think that actually like induction and electric would be something that they would and they actually, that's what they have.
But it's also along the lines of, isn't it along the lines of like, hey, listen, I hate to tell you this, but I know your kid has asthma, and there's new research out that says like 18% of kids that have asthma, or like 1 in 8 kids, it's because of their gas stove in their house, and you probably should replace that if your kid has asthma. And then the reaction would be like, don't you tell me what to do. I'm like, I'm not. I'm just saying your kid, if you care about your kid's health.
And maybe you don't want that. And again, everyone that is freaking out about the gas stove thing will not say that research is accurate. If you ask them about it, they'll deflect. They'll say, well, it was funded by this organization that is like anti-fossil fuel and, completely bogus. Not to mention, by the way, that was not the first study showing that like stoves cause respiratory problems in children and adults, right? It's far from the first. It's not like a terribly hard thing to prove. It's been done before. Again, it's like if you don't care about kids, if you don't care about like kids' respiratory health, just say that. Stop making up these reasons like, oh, it's bogus. Just say that, I, as a person who has asthma and who I recently found out I did have a gas stove in my house growing up, and now my mom feels really guilty about it. Right? Like
one of the best things I've seen online in the past few days was your screenshot of your text messages with your mom asking about that. It's really funny. I highly recommend it. Can't be explained on, you got to just go read them for yourself. You shared that. And that you shared it.
I was like, did we have a gas stove when I was a kid? And she was like, that fucking house that your father made me move into. It had this fucking terrible kitchen, so stupid. And I put this stuff, and I was like, okay, well, I think it might have given me asthma. And she's like, oh.
Forgive me. I said it couldn't be done on the podcast. You just nailed it. It's just like that. And you grew up like near where I live now too. And it was like so funny to see that house in Spring Valley. Anyway, last question I wanted to just ask you is kind of, and I hope I get to talk to you again soon, is just about the next couple of years in terms of legislation, whether it be, to talk about anything. There's a lot of interesting developments in states that are not run by Democrats, like Michigan. I haven't seen anything on energy and environment necessarily, but they're getting some interesting things done. But obviously the House is now run by Republicans. The Senate is what it is, as you know. But I mean, any forecast or what are your thoughts about the next couple of years of potential inaction and lost time?
The thing that I think first of all, I'm not expecting anything to come from the federal government. I think the Inflation Reduction Act was about the biggest action that we could expect from the federal government on climate change for a long time, particularly now that the House is controlled by Republicans.
And I should have asked you what you think about that quickly. I mean, that was a pretty huge investment. The outcomes that we're going to see over the next few years, I'd imagine those investments kind of coming to fruition. I should have asked you what you thought about that.
I mean, it's objectively it's objectively like a monumental piece of legislation when it comes to incentivizing the growth of renewable energy and no carbon energy in the United States. Obviously, I think that as any person that like really understands what needs to be done to effectively slow climate change, I wish it had gone a lot further. However, that's sort of the case for every kind of movement and legislation and consumer activism. I always wish it went further because it always needs to be done. What I think is going to be really interesting down the line is that a lot of the incentives for, let's say, getting an electric stove, right? That's something that's in the IRA.
There's $845. Yeah.
Right. But that's going to be up to states to decide when that goes into effect, who is eligible to get it. That's like a state by state decision that the IRA gave states power to kind of decide a lot of how the funding is allocated. And so I think that is going to be really something to watch. How do blue states and red states, like how do they allocate that money? And then who gets that money from the IRA is it actually going to go towards what it's supposed to be going towards? That I think is really, it's not a blessing that we have a divided Congress that won't pass any significant climate legislation. However, it does free up reporters who are covering actual climate legislation to kind of focus on seeing whether or not this huge piece of climate legislation that passed is actually going to play out.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's
and then the other thing is just I'm really interested in these statewide efforts to ban new gas hookups in new buildings, for stoves and for gas heaters and for all that kind of stuff. Because not only are, blue states passing legislation that, all new homes and businesses have to be fully electric, no gas hookups, but then a lot of red states are passing laws that say you can't pass any laws banning gas, right? Bans on bans. So that is, and I'm interested to see how the gas industry ramps up its fight, because that's always my favorite thing to cover is like the absolute morally corrupt shit that this industry will pull to try and kill these things that will cut into their profits, because that's ultimately what this is all about.
And you are the best in the game at that. I'm so glad that you're back, that you've hired Ariel, that you're growing, that hope everybody listening subscribes right now to Emily's really important work. Heated.World. So great to catch up with you and talk to you. Thank you so much for joining me again.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, there she goes, everybody. Emily Atkin, Heated.World. Go get a paid subscription right now. All right, that's all I've got for you. Maura, Quint, Emily Atkin, and me. Thank you, Pete Coe, for the opening. Thank you, Jon Carroll, for the music. And thank you, Odessa Son, who's doing a great job helping me produce this show every day as my production intern. Very happy, of course, and thankful and grateful for you, for listening, for telling your friends, for giving a review on Spotify, Apple, and, of course, for a paid subscription for as little as $5 a month or more. You can always pay more, upgrade your subscription if you want. You're getting more out of it than that. Really appreciate it. StandUpWithPete.com. That's all I've got for you today. I will talk to you tomorrow. Great guests scheduled to join me this week. Still to come, Julia Jeske of Decoding Fox News. The great Barry Ritholtz is going to join me this week. Kristen Dumez is scheduled to be on the program. Author highly recommended by many of you. She wrote Jesus and John Wayne, How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation. Very much looking forward to talking with her. All right, I'm out. Gotta go post this baby so you can download and listen to it and tell me what you think of it. Bye-bye.